Welcome to the 10-minute UFC breakdown. Now, this might end up being 15 or 20 minutes, but I'm still going to call it 10 minutes. I'm just going to blatantly lie to you right there in the title. I've got a lot to say. I'm sorry. My name is Stan Drive. I'm the co-host of the MMA Geeks C-Level podcast. If you like this video, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you find this information helpful. Also, follow me on Instagram at The Constant Martial Artist, on Twitter at Stan Drive, and check out the podcast. Links are all below. This week we've got two cards to break down, one on Wednesday, one on Saturday. Wednesday we've got Calvin Kattar versus Dan Ige main eventing, and then Saturday the much better card. We've got Dawson Figueiredo going up against Joe Benavidez for the flyweight championship. On the last episode I broke down UFC 251 Usman versus Masvidal. I think I hit a lot of the finer points of each matchup really well. The thing is that one fight in particular pisses me off, and it's not Max versus Volkanovski. It's Muslim Salikov versus Alicio Zaleski dos Santos. I thought that fight clearly belonged to dos Santos, and the judges terribly messed it up, screwing me. I mean, I guess dos Santos might not be excited about it as well, but more importantly, it screws my record. Would have had a 77% pick rate on the night, but I'll have to settle for that 9-4. This week, I'm going to factor in the judges' biases. That's right, Lucas Bosaki and Clement Warner. Clement Warner, what kind of a goddamn name is that? There's actually nothing wrong with that name. I'm just really bitter about that one decision. First, we're going to get into Wednesday's UFC on ESPN, Ige versus Kattar. A fascinating matchup, I think, in a lot of ways, and I'm a little bit surprised that the odds are so far apart on this one. Kattar is 21-4 overall, 5-2 in the UFC. He's actually ranked number 6 at featherweight. His last 4 wins have come by knockout, and they include wins over Shane Burgos, Ricardo Lamas, and Jeremy Stephens. That's a pretty impressive list. Trains in Boston with Rob Font. He spent time in Vegas at Syndicate MMA leading into this matchup. Got an excellent jab, overall great boxing, incorporates kicks more than ever recently. His takedown defense is 77%, but he does tend to get up right away if he does get taken down. He's got weakness against kind of a long-range kicker with a focus on footwork. Guys like Yair Rodriguez and Zamit Magomedsharipov, and those are the exact two guys that were able to defeat him in the UFC by decision thus far. My concerns about him is that he's better on the front foot than the back foot, and also that he blocks without countering against blitzes at times, and Ige throws plenty of blitzes. Dan Ige is 14-2 overall, 6-1 in the UFC, 6 wins in a row as a matter of fact, has wins over Mirsad Bektic and Edson Barboza, which is very impressive as well. Trains at Extreme Couture in Las Vegas. He's a relentless pressure fighter, full power blitzes, constantly putting something out there for his opponent to worry about. He's got a great ground game and 2 UFC finishes on the ground, one by ground and pound and one by submission. He takes damage, especially against guys like Edson Barboza, but he doesn't really care. It does wear on him and it does build on him, but that man will keep trying till every last minute of a fight. I think that Ige has a lot of heart, right? And it's enough heart to take plenty of damage from Edson Barboza in a 3-round fight. I'm not sure that he's going to be able to pull that off against Calvin Kattar in a 5-rounder. If he takes nearly as much punishment from Calvin's hands as he did from Edson's kicks, then he's going to be in a lot of trouble in this one. For that reason, the fact that Calvin is the bigger man, by far taller, significant reach advantage, he gets stronger as the fight goes on, and he's likely not going to be beat up toward the end of the fight. I favor Calvin Kattar to get a late knockout somewhere between that last part of the 3rd round, maybe all the way to the 5th round. It's very possible. I'd be somewhat surprised if this goes to decision, but if it does, we're in for a banger. It will be exciting. Next, we have the flyweight matchup between Tim Elliott and Ryan Benoit. Benoit is 10-6 overall, 3-4 in the UFC. 3 of those losses are by split decision, though. He recently switched to the Renzo Gracie Academy in New York City. That's helped improve his kicking game. His hands are better now. He seems to be overall faster, even though he does kind of still get tired toward the end of a bout. But good news is that he's facing Tim Elliott, who's known even more so for getting gassed after about 3 to 5 minutes. Elliott is 15-11 overall, 4-9 in the UFC. Not exactly a winning record here. Great run on Tough, which led into a title shot against Demetrius Johnson. He looked really good early, and then everything fell apart. And quite frankly, everything kind of fell apart for his career after that. He just doesn't seem to have the heart to really put everything into his training anymore. He gets tired in a way that makes you think he doesn't really invest in a training camp. Either that or he's just really terrible at energy management. He's got a funky striking and wrestling and grappling style, but I'd say his biggest strength is probably his wrestling and top position grappling. Considering there are better fights to go into the co-main event slot on this card, it's kind of weird that this fight between these two fighters that are either just barely at 500 or below in the UFC, are co-main eventing here. But I expect Elliott to gas out in about 3 to 5 minutes, and then I expect Benoit to take over from there. Not sure that Benoit will finish, but I think all Benoit has to do is make it through that storm. Next up, this is probably the fight that should have been in the co-main event. We've got a matchup between Jimmy Rivera and Cody Stamann. Rivera is a Tiger Schulman's New Jersey guy, 22-4 overall, 6-3 in the UFC. He's ranked number 9 in the world. After going 5-0 in his UFC career, he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights. He's got wins over Uriah Faber, Pedro Munoz, and John Dawson. Really impressive names on your resume. He's a quick, technical fighter, mostly focuses on the stand-up. He's got good footwork, really likes to focus on those low leg calf kicks, which have been very effective for anybody that's willing to really invest some effort into those. He is slowly losing his chin as he's gotten knocked down 4 times in his last 3 fights. One of those knockdowns was a knockout against Marlon Moraes, and those 3 knockdowns are from current champ Petr Yan at 135. He actually looked really good against Yan, except for the moments in which he was getting hurt. And it's a shame that skill-wise he is above the current champ, but he couldn't quite keep it all together long enough. That power really took over. He's got great takedown defense, 95% in the UFC. In fact, the only takedown he's given up in his UFC career is in his very last bout against Yan. Now, Cody Stamann trains at Extreme Couture. He's 19-2 overall, 5-1 in the UFC. His only loss coming to number 1 contender Aljamain Sterling. He's a really solid wrestler, but he's been showing bigger and bigger strides in his striking game. All of his wins in the UFC are by decision and no knockdowns in his UFC career. For that reason, I favor Jimmy Rivera. I think if there's one weakness on Jimmy at this point in his career, it's that he can't necessarily take a big bomb from an opponent. And facing an opponent that's not known for his striking here, facing an opponent that for once actually has a reach disadvantage against Jimmy Rivera, who always comes in as the smaller guy, I think this is going to favor Jimmy. He's going to be more technical. He will probably not let a single takedown go here, and he's going to be able to outstrike Stamann, and whatever shots he takes from Stamann, I think he should be able to take without being hurt. Next up, Molly McCann versus Talia Santos. I actually think there's a serious betting opportunity on this card given the current odds. Santos is 15-1. Her one loss is to Mara Romero Borello in her UFC debut by split decision. Most of her career has been against 0-1 and 0-0 fighters prior to her UFC debut. She's big, decent takedowns, has decent submissions. Generally, her stand-up is kind of limited, but she does have decent technique in the one pot shot at a time that she tends to throw. She can be pressured, though, and she can be taken down and controlled, and that's exactly how Mara Romero Borello was able to get that decision over her. Across the octagon, we're going to have Molly Meatball McCann, really likable, exciting fighter. She's a firecracker, and she's quickly getting onto my list as one of my favorite fighters. She's an English fighter, 10-2 overall, 3-1 in the UFC. Beat mostly non-UFC level talent, to be fair, in the promotion, but she has good fundamentals, a pressure game, good head movement, decent footwork. Her boxing is probably her biggest strength, and she's got plenty of heart and determination, willing to go for takedowns if she feels like she needs it. Now, I mentioned that Molly has only beaten kind of sub-UFC level opponents, and I put Santos into that category. Prior to the fight before Santos' UFC debut, her opponents' combined records was 7-11. That's how bad the opposition she'd been fighting leading up to that has been, and all the way up to 13-0. So I like Molly McCann to put some numbers on her, walk away with this decision. The further into the fight we go, I think the more Molly will be dominating as Santos loses her will. Next up, we've got the return of Abdul Razak Alhassan versus Mounir Lazaza. I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly. Probably not, though. Alhassan is 10-1 overall, 4-1 in the UFC. All of his wins are by first-round knockout, which is insane. He's a judo black belt. His one loss is to Omari Akhmedov, and it was mostly because Akhmedov took him down and controlled him for a split decision win. Trains at Fortis MMA with guys like Geoff Neal and Diego Ferreira under coach Saif Saud, who I believe originates from the Greg Jackson camp. Now, Mounir the Sniper Lazez is a Tunisian fighter from Team Nogueira, Dubai. He's 6'2" to Hassan's 5'10", so there's going to be a height and reach advantage for Lazez here. Fast hands. He's got some heart. Has had a couple of comebacks in his young career. Not the best takedown defense, and in my opinion, he takes too many shots, especially against an opponent like Razak Alhassan, who's got insane power. I expect Alhassan to walk away with a first-round knockout here. I think he's one of the biggest favorites on both cards coming up this week, so there's good reason for it in all likelihood. Now we're going to get into Saturday's UFC on ESPN Plus, which is headlined by Figueiredo as he goes up against, once again, Benavidez. Deiveson Figueiredo is 18-1 overall, 7-1 in the UFC. He beat Moraga, Pantoja, Tim Elliott, and Joe Benavidez. His one loss is to Jose Formiga, who Benavidez has actually finished twice. He trains at this little-known gym in Brazil, but I think he's particularly special. Generally, he likes to hunt his opponents down. He doesn't like to throw a whole lot. He just waits for the opportunity to counter or explode so that he can finish you, very similar to Peter Yan. The man has serious power, especially in that right hand of his. Improved takedown defense, although when he gets taken down, he tends to get up fairly quickly. He has pretty good jiu-jitsu. It's like he kind of tries for a couple submissions, and if that doesn't work, within about a minute, gets back to his feet. Now, in the UFC, he's landed less than 4 of his opponents have landed on him and won those 4 fights, which is extremely impressive. It just shows the level of power the man has. I think probably all of those were by finish. Now, Joseph Benavidez is 28-6 overall, 15-4 in the UFC. Used to train at Team Alpha Male. He now trains at Extreme Couture in Las Vegas. He has wins over Hani Yahya, Jose Formiga, Alex Perez, and Henry Cejudo. Those last 2 are particularly impressive given where the 125 and 135 divisions stand at the moment. Losses are to Sergio Pettis, Dominic Cruz, and Demetrius Johnson. The latter 2 he lost to twice. He has solid wrestling, very good jiu-jitsu, kind of a blitzing Dwayne Ludwig style, but without the head movement. He just kind of blitzes forward with his head right in the center line, which in my opinion puts him in major danger. It's the reason I picked Figueiredo for the first fight, is because I expected that Joe was going to walk into Figueiredo's right hand sooner or later with the way that he fights. Now, in the first fight, Figueiredo took him down in the first minute or so, went for a submission, couldn't get it, they went back to the feet, and then Figueiredo started kind of waiting for the perfect punch opportunity to come. It's like he watched tape on him and he knew that Joe was probably going to run right into where his right hand is going to be thrown. And Joe kept going with those head-first blitzes. A couple of those right hands landed, but it wasn't enough to hurt him. But in that second round, Joe blitzed his way into a headbutt, hurt himself, and then naturally Figueiredo, with his killer instinct, was able to tie it up and win the fight. Then, I know Figueiredo didn't make weight last time, and I know that the headbutt, some people say, played a factor in the fact that he beat Benavidez, but I think the headbutt was entirely Benavidez's fault. And as much as it opened up a cut, it did not rock Benavidez as far as I could tell. So I've got Figueiredo here the whole way. I think he just needs to land a right hand at some point during that bout. No reason to think that Joe's like a major danger to him. It seemed to me like Figueiredo was very comfortable taking punches from Joe. He had no mind about defense, and I don't think it's because he was okay with getting hit with power. I think it's because he realized Joe doesn't have a whole lot of power that he needs to worry about. After all, Figueiredo's a huge man for the 125-pound division. I expect him to walk away with the strap. Next, we got Hermansson versus Kelvin Gastelum. Hermansson is 20-5 overall, 7-3 in the UFC. Trains at a little-known gym in Norway. His wins include Jacare Souza, David Branch, Gerald Mirchot, and Talis Ladies. He's actually an expert at beating Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, apparently. His losses are to Cesar Ferreira, Thiago Santos, and Jared Cannonier. Seems to be kind of the more athletic, the bigger men that he tends to lose to. He has a high output, through almost 500 strikes in that Jacare fight, which is, I think, the UFC record. It's absolutely unheard of for one man to do that in 25 minutes. He's got great cardio, obviously, if he's able to throw that much. Excellent ground game. His 5 UFC wins are either by ground and pound or submission from top position. Excellent arming guillotine. Excellent ground and pound once he gets to mount, and he's really good at getting to mount. Kelvin Gastelum is 16-5 overall, 10-5 in the UFC. He trains at King's MMA under Rafael Cordero with Marvin Vettori, Benil Dariush, Giga Chikadze. Wins over Jacare, Michael Bisping, and Vitor Belfort. His losses are to Darren Till recently, Israel Adesanya, and Chris Weidman. Now, he's a fast southpaw that came up from welterweight a couple years ago and realized a lot of success at 185. He's got a killer left hand. Limited offense, I think, overall. He basically mostly throws a jab, jab cross, or cross. The occasional high kick is in there, and that's really about it. Currently, he's riding a 2-fight losing streak. Now, here's the thing. Gastelum's last 7 wins are against older, either retired or should-be retired fighters. Jake Ellenberger, retired. Nate Marquardt, retired. Johnny Hendricks, retired. Tim Kennedy, retired. Vitor Belfort should be retired, but instead he got on the juice and went 10 years back. Michael Bisping is retired. Jacare Souza probably should be retired. Now, his losses are to young, taller opponents like Neil Magny, Chris Weidman, Israel Adesanya, Darren Till, as I said earlier. I'm picking Hermansson for those reasons. I have some concern about the fact that Hermansson doesn't tend to come back. Like if you hurt him badly, he's just going to cover up and wait for the referee to get in there. And that's kind of been how he's lost in the UFC for the most part thus far. So I do have some concern there. If Kelvin Gastelum can land that clean left hand, will Hermansson do anything after that? Now, I tend to think that Hermansson takes strikes on the counter, not so much by giving his opponent distance. And that's how Kelvin gets his knockouts, is he needs that distance to explode, cover that distance, and land that 1-2 on you. I don't think Hermansson is going to give him that opportunity. I think Hermansson is going to pressure with those low kicks, pressure with nonstop punches. He's going to go for takedowns. He's going to, I think at some point or other, get top position. And if he can, he's probably going to finish Gastelum. The last time Gastelum has been finished, it was by submission by Chris Weidman, another kind of big middleweight. So I expect Hermansson to do really well here to walk away with an impressive victory. I know the odds are very close, but I have a little bit of confidence in this one. I do, however, always have that concern about the Kelvin Gastelum left hand and the lack of heart that Hermansson has displayed in some fights. Next, we've got a fight that guarantees fireworks. We've got Mark Diakase going up against Rafael Fiziev. Fiziev is 7-1 overall, 1-1 in the UFC. He's a high-level Muay Thai fighter. He coaches actually at Tiger Muay Thai, which houses a lot of the better Russian talent in the UFC currently. Pressures with fakes and hard low kicks. Counters with big hand combos. He switches stances constantly. He's got the same striking coach coming up as Valentina Shevchenko, from what I understand. He will go for the occasional takedown from the clinch. Apparently, he's a really impressive wrestler, at least in the gym. Not very much ground and pound once he gets into that position, though. He does tend to slow down in the third round, given all of his explosiveness, but he still throws with speed and power once he is tired. Mark Diakase, 14-3 overall. He's 5-3 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight win streak after a 3-fight skid. Left American top team to train at home in England. He's a long-range kickboxer. He likes space to work. He likes space to explode. He likes moments in between his explosions. Favors calf kicks, spinning attacks, and he will go for body lock takedowns if he feels like he's in control of the fight. I'm picking Rafael Fiziev here mostly because Diakase doesn't respond well to pressure fighters, and that's exactly what Fiziev is. I do have some concerns about Diakase's low leg calf kicks. Those are really dangerous, and he's really effective with them in his last 2 fights. And I do have some concern about his overall size advantage in this matchup. But I'm going with Fiziev. I'm going with the underdog. Next, we've got a flyweight matchup between Alexander Pantoja and Askar Askarov. Pantoja is 22-4 overall, 6-2 in the UFC, trains at American top team, number 4 in the world at flyweight. His win list includes Brandon Moreno, Wilson Hayes, and Matt Schnell. He lost to Deiveson Figueiredo, who is arguably number 1 in the world, and Dustin Ortiz. He's got solid power striking, although not very much depth to his striking game, and he has a very high level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Pretty athletic overall guy, but he does tend to tire as the fight wears on. Askar Askarov is 11-0-1. In the UFC, he beat Tim Elliott in his last bout and went to a draw with top-ranked Brandon Moreno before that. I actually thought Brandon Moreno deserved that decision for the record. He's a grappling-focused fighter, good takedowns, okay control, okay standing up. Like, he can throw with some power, and he's got plenty of heart if you hurt him, but that's not where he's going to win this fight. I'm giving the edge to Pantoja in this one. Now, his gas tank is a little bit of a concern here, given that Askarov has a pretty good gas tank and plenty of heart, but Askarov is not really a finisher, so I don't think it should be much of an issue. I think those first 2 rounds, Pantoja should be able to be the better striker, the better grappler. The only department in which Askarov will have the advantage skill-wise going in is in the wrestling department, and that's not going to be enough here. Next, we've got a great matchup between prospects Chad Dawson and Nad Narmani. Narmani is 12-3 overall, 2-1 in the UFC, wins over Kalitaha and a loss to Mike Grundy. Trains on and off at Team Alpha Male. He's coming back after a 16-month layoff. He's a low-paced power striker, and he really does hit hard once he decides to explode. He does go for takedowns once he's in control as well. Grant Dawson is 15-1, 3-0 in the UFC, trains at Glory MMA with James Krause as his chief corner. He's got wins over tough champ Mike Trezano and Julian Erosa, who recently got a big come-from-behind victory. He's a pressure grappler, excellent chokes, grabs and never lets go of an opponent once he has him, kind of like Khabib, except he's probably not as good overall at takedowns. He prefers body-like takedowns overall, and if you can't get him, he'll just hold you in that clinch, and he will just latch onto you and pick at you shot after shot. He's got cardio for days, some power in his hands, but I'd say his stand-up is not nearly as developed as his ground game. I like Nad Narmani. I just don't think this is a good matchup for him. I think that Dawson is going to be able to pressure his way into second or third round submission here. The thing is that I tend to choose the master of one over the jack of all trades in most cases, and Dawson is an excellent top position grappler, whereas Narmani is kind of a wrestle boxer who's pretty good at both, but not excellent at either. Next, we have Joe Duffy coming back to face Joel Alvarez. Duffy is 16-4, 4-3 in the UFC, has an early career win over Conor McGregor, and that's kind of his claim to fame, and that's what puts him on everyone's radar, I think, throughout his UFC career. He was a prospect, but quickly turned into a journeyman over the last couple of bouts. After going 4-1 in the UFC, he's on a 2-fight losing skid. He's got wins over mid-level fighters, losses to talented fighters. He's got really good boxing, an excellent jab, and good takedown defense, as you would expect, I think, from most TriStar fighters. Joel Alvarez is 16-2, 1-1 in the UFC, trains out of Spain. Decent submission grappler, very tall for lightweight at 6'3". His stand-up is okay, but not very developed. He doesn't really pull the trigger much. Pretty low output for Alvarez. Duffy is seemingly past his prime, but I haven't seen anything in Alvarez that would lead me to think that that's going to be enough of a factor here. I think Duffy's going to be the faster boxer. He's going to be able to avoid most takedowns, and even on the ground, he should be fine. So I expect Duffy to walk away with a clear-cut decision here. Next, we've got another matchup between two prospects when Brett Johns goes up against Montel Jackson. Johns is 16-2, overall 4-2 in the UFC. His losses are to Pedro Munoz and Aljamain Sterling, who are top 5 bantamweights. Not a whole lot to be ashamed of there. He's a solid grappler with developing striking, got plenty of heart, and he will never stop trying. Montel Jackson is 9-1, 3-1 in the UFC. He trains at a small Michigan gym with Zach Otto. He's got fast hands and an imposing wrestling game. He's actually submitted Brian Kelleher, which is pretty impressive considering Kelleher's talents on the ground. He's a real prospect at 135, and he's pretty tall for the division at 5'10". I favor Jackson's wrestling edge and his hand speed over Johns' grappling. I think if Johns can get Jackson's back, especially late in the fight, he has a very good chance of finishing like he did in his last bout. But I expect Jackson to be able to take him down. Johns has given up 8 takedowns in his last 3 fights, and Jackson is a high-level wrestler. And finally, we've got Davi Ramos going up against Arman Tsarukyan. Ramos is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expert, 10-3 overall, 4-2 in the UFC. Really high-level BJJ, short but very strong, stocky guy, great takedowns, solid grinder with improving hands is, I guess, how I would describe him in a sentence. Tsarukyan is a serious prospect, in my opinion, in this division. 14-2 overall, 1-1 in the UFC. His win is against Olivier Aubin Mercier, and his loss is to ranked opponent Islam Makhachev, who he had to face in his UFC debut. He trains at Tiger Muay Thai. Good stand-up, very fancy explosive kicks. He's an excellent grappler, though. He will suck the life out of you by repeatedly taking you down and controlling you on the ground. That is, if you won't give up a submission. I favor Tsarukyan here. I'm a big believer in him. I think Ramos is also probably past his prime. I favor his size. He's going to be the better striker by far. I think he'll be fine in the wrestling department. Even if he does get taken down by Ramos, he'll be fine. He'll survive. He'll get back to his feet. He'll be able to score takedowns against Ramos, especially as Ramos tires late in the fight. Thanks for watching. Barring any terrible judging, I expect to do really well on this one, and I look forward to boasting about it next episode.